Hi, welcome to Gear Garage. I'm Zach. This is my little internet show about whitewater stuff. And today I want to talk about rescue harnesses again. Sometimes I call them safety harnesses, but they're probably really called rescue harnesses on PFDs. And the last episode, I asked the question, should most paddlers wear them? And I see a lot of people out paddling who I'm pretty confident don't have training, don't have practice, that just have it because that's what everybody gets, and they feel like someday they'll use it. And I think that we don't all need these safety harnesses. And so I want to talk more in depth about who might use them and talk about some things I've learned since I put that episode out. The cool thing about this show is I can pose a question, I can think about these things, and I get feedback from a lot of people in the YouTube comments or just friends I run into and say, hey, I saw that episode, here's my nuanced thoughts about it. And they're all over the gamut. They're from like, yeah, absolutely, you're totally right, to like, you're an idiot and you shouldn't be doing internet shows. So, you know, I want to kind of share more complex thoughts. This is going to be a longer, more verbose episode than normal, just because there's a lot of thoughts here. So first of all, a rescue PFD includes this belt around the outside. And this belt is a way to allows you, here's one on the Astro Vest, allows you to clip something in, typically a rope, into this, and either like use it to rescue a person in a boat and stabilize them, or put somebody on what's called live bait, which means attach a rope to this, have them jump into the river, and hopefully extricate somebody. Anytime you're attached to a permanent rope is incredibly scary, right? Because that rope could get tangled, you get in a bad position. So these things have to have these releasable harnesses that allow this to release and the whole thing to come undone. So if you're tied to a rope, you go in the river after somebody or something, and it gets bad, you can get out of the situation. The thing about it that's kind of scary is if you're being lowered into a position or going after a swimmer, it's not usually above something mellow. It's usually above a log, it's above a sieve, it's above another big rapid. So you're basically going in on a rope, realizing it's bad, releasing, and then swimming some gnarly thing. So these are not for the faint of heart. This is for like people who are active, knowledgeable, practiced. It's a very important thing to go into using a rescue harness correctly. And so I want to preface everything with anybody who gets these things, these vests with these rescue harnesses, should probably have training. And you can get that training through a swiftwater rescue class. And in a class, last class that I took, we went in, we jumped in the water, we used it a bunch, we got very comfortable with it, we got used to the mechanism, and we gained a certain comfort level with it. The last class I took was about 10 years ago, and so I haven't really practiced since then. So if I was to use this in a real situation, I'm going in unpracticed. So I should be practicing more. And I really feel like those of you that use these and want to have them, and many of you should have training and you should have practice. And in just a quick aside about safety in general, I feel really strongly about preventative safety, making good decisions, but then having knowledge and training to provide rescue and equipment too. But I personally feel like knowledge, training, and practice is more important than a bunch of doodads. That's probably why I'm like a little bit down on these rescue harnesses, because I feel like a lot of people have them, don't have any of that. And they just think by having them they're safer, and that is not the case. Like it's a tool you can use, but you need to practice with it. I just as an aside, I've been looking through this book. This book was recommended to me, Whitewater Safety and Rescue, Franco Ferrero. This is an amazing book because it's super focused on safety and prevention with some rescue at the end. And so I'll put a link in the notes below to check this out, but I'm digging this book right now. And I really, again, I'm focused on safety and prevention over rescue. This is a tool for rescue. And so that's what we're talking about today, is this safety harness for rescue. And I feel like in the whitewater community, there's no direct answer to things. There's not enough data, there's not research, or like we learn and get better through discussions, through classes. Hopefully this video creates some sort of dialogue where I can learn from you guys can get my thoughts, and we can iterate and get better and better and better. But the idea, again, is just like, let's have these discussions, let's share the pros and cons, and I'll try to learn from them as we get better. So, with that said, I want to give some more nuanced thoughts about these rescue harnesses. And so, one quick thing is there's also these toe tethers. So there's two separate things. There's the rescue harness and the toe tether. And the toe tether, can be used to attach into a safety line. You can just take it off and attach it to a rope, but somebody could also just attach that rope to your back. So I think for attaching to a rope, this is a nice to have, but not necessary. This is really useful if you're kayaking and need to retrieve unconscious swimmers, or equipment. And so I learned to kayak in California. We rarely use these in California because the rivers are pull or drop. You go over a rapid, there'd be a recovery, go over a rapid, be a recovery. We never really needed these. We were able to, if somebody swam, we could just push their boat to shore with our boat, handle it. Here in Northwest, more people wear these. The rivers are more continuous, so if you swim or your boat goes, really the only way to get a boat to shore sometimes is having one of these. So a lot more people up here in the Northwest have them. So you choose to have it, this toe tether in particular, based on like your type of boating you're doing, whether you're, if you're an instructor and you're saving students' boats all the time, great. If you're free swim all the time, probably a good idea. For me, I wear it when I'm paid as like a safety kayaker, or I'm at work guiding other kayakers, which isn't that often, but it's occasional. So I bring this because I'm a professional expected to provide safety. When I'm kayaking for fun, I don't personally wear this. When I'm out kayaking, I don't like the extra danger that this cowtail thing adds. That's just a personal choice. But one thing a lot of you saw in the last video was I had this attached to a permanent point on my vest. And that was wrong. And thank you for everybody that pointed it out. I shouldn't, if I want to be a YouTuber and like share my thoughts, I shouldn't be doing incorrect things. And a lot of you noticed that. So thank you. I made a mistake. And I want to be clear. This should be attached to like a releasable part of the PFD, not this, which is permanent. And that's because this whole thing can get caught up in a log, in a tree, and it has for many people, and they haven't been able to release it. And so anytime you have a toe tether, you should have it double releasable here and releasable here, so that either side can release. There have been a good number of accidents and fatalities based on people's toe tethers getting caught. The reason I have this attached permanently is because it turns out this mechanism is starting to fail on my PFD. So the last 2 times I've worn it while I've been paddling, it's just come undone, and so I just quickly clipped it there and never got it back. But with this particular PFD, it easily comes off. I think too easily comes off. And again, I've just been paddling, and it's sort of just like come off. So I don't know what to do about that. I'm not currently using this PFD with this because it comes undone on its own, and I have a solution. This is just for showing how these things work. So anyway, that's toe tethers. Again, it's up to you whether you want one. You have to know the dangers and use them correctly. And again, I showed incorrect use in the last video, and for that, I apologize. So let's move on. The last video I did, I was really in my brain thinking about like class 3, 4 river guides and rafters. I wasn't thinking about kayakers and the whole gamut. And there's a lot of people who use safety vests, rescue vests for different uses. I mean, the first super obvious use are like safety professionals. If you're paid to be on scene to provide safety from shore, this is a no-brainer, right? You're a professional, you know how to use it, and you're just there to provide safety below a rapid during a race, or maybe if somebody's filming a TV show on a river and you're there, you want to be on live bait ready to go. Awesome. And those safety professionals know what they're doing. The classic example is during the green race below Gorilla, which is a big class 5 drop. If you swim, the swim is not fun. And so having people below Gorilla, if somebody swims, they can just jump in, grab the person. They have a rope attached to somebody on shore. They can just come back to shore with that person. So great use. Safety professionals, no-brainer. For those of you kayaking, a rescue vest, a rescue harness, I keep saying safety, it really should be rescue, is something to really think about as a hardshell kayaker. If you're kayaking class 5, probably a good idea. If you're kayaking in remote places, probably a good idea. There's some examples people gave me in the comments were of, somebody getting trapped in a sieve on the Little White, and then somebody being lowered down on the rope with the rescue harness to pull that person out. That makes sense. If somebody's stuck in a tree, maybe the only way to get them would be to be lowered down on a rope and pull up. But in those examples, or it could be gear. A kayak could be stuck in a log. A kayak could be stuck somewhere. But in those examples, you're putting your own personal safety at risk to save a person or gear. I'm a huge fan. Never put yourself at risk ever for gear. If a kayak's stuck there, leave it. It's littering, but whatever. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way, be lowered on a rope into a dangerous spot to save a kayak. If it's a person, it's a judgment call. And we learn in rescue that to take care of yourself, then the team, then bystanders, then victim last. And so putting yourself at risk to save a victim is a decision you have to make, but it's generally frowned upon. Something like 30% of all fatalities are the rescuer. I heard that somewhere, I'm not sure if it's true, but people die being the rescuer. And so, you know, if somebody's trapped in a sieve, you want to do something, but it's something to consider whether you want to get close to that sieve, right? And again, if your rope gets messed up and you have to release, you're in that sieve as well. So class 5 kayakers, this is a whole other world. You guys can think about this on your own. I was in a situation last week where we were kayaking and there was like a 10-foot drop, which had current right down into a river-wide like death log. I portaged. I was like, I'm not messing with this. But a few people wanted to run that top drop and then come to shore really quick and portage the log. Well, just last week I had somebody there had to be on live bait, so I clipped the rope into the back of their PFD. I was on shore. This is since I did the last video. I was on shore with the rope, and if those people had swum or even flipped, he would have jumped in, I would have held him, and we would have stopped before they went down into the log. But my fear is if I had him on belay and he's in the water holding on the kayak, and for some reason he had to release, they're both going into that log. And it's something interesting to think about. We didn't need to use it. It was nice to have as a backup. And again, if you're in remote places running hard stuff, you're in a different world, right? If you're a class 3 kayaker running the same class 3 run all the time, or generally doing well-known class 3, 4 rivers, it may or may not apply to you, right? This safety, they're probably, if there aren't sieves, there isn't wood, like you probably have a hard time justifying having a safety harness with you. So that's just something to think about. I don't think it's definitely for you. You don't have to have it, right? But the other thing to think about is if you're the one pinned in a sieve or you're the one pinned in a tree, it's nice to have because there's no other good place for people to clip onto you. So if you're vertically pinned in a kayak, somebody can clip this into you and they can try to pull you out. It's the best place to attach for your own personal safety. So that's kayaking. Next is raft guides. I feel like a lot of raft guides feel like they need to have these things. And, you know, I see some raft guides that have, you know, carabiners up here, pulleys hanging off, like big safety harness, huge knife in the front. And to me, I think that's an interesting look. I think that's a lot of rescue stuff. You're saying, hey, I'm a safety squirrel, right? If you're guiding some like class 5 river in Iceland where there's sieves, that makes a lot of sense. If you're guiding a big volume river like the Grand Canyon, it may not make sense, right? In big volume, there aren't trees and sieves and things. You're not getting yourself in those situations, and you're adding all this extra stuff that you could get caught up on. And so I just think it's something to consider that maybe you don't need all this extra stuff when you're guiding rivers like that. And, you know, if you're guiding some rivers, again, like let's say like the Tuolumne in California at high water, if you have your PFD and you have your rescue harness and you have your knife and your, you know, all this stuff, your PFD starts getting pretty heavy. I've looked at some of these PFDs up. It's basically just a bunch of pockets for all your metal stuff. It's not really a buoyancy device. And so you have all the safety stuff, but if you swim, the weight is all cumulative. And the rescue harness is just one more 4-ounce thing. So 4 ounces here, 6 ounces there. All of a sudden your PFD has 13 pounds of buoyancy instead of 16 pounds, 4 ounces, and which is the minimum. And a big guy like me can't keep their head above water on a big volume river. So if I'm guiding high water Tuolumne, I'm super focused on or even Cherry Creek, like something that's not super high volume. I'm super focused on if I swim, keeping my head above water over having all these devices all over me. And that's just a judgment call you have to make. Your own buoyancy versus all this safety stuff, which again adds up. So for raft guide, it kind of depends on where you work, what you're doing, and also how you want to appear to your guests, right? Like if you show up and you have all this safety stuff and a big knife across the front, it somewhat looks a little overwhelming to some of them to see all kinds of stuff all over you. And to some people on a harder river, it might be a good look because they're like, man, this person's definitely hardcore safe. So it's up to you. And then finally, private boaters. I think a lot of private boaters get these safety PFDs because they're like, oh, I'm going to take a class someday, and I'm going to get better at it. I'm going to be a rescue person, and that's something to consider. But I think before you have the training and without the practice, it may not be appropriate. So I would personally urge you to wait until you've had the training to decide if you want to do it, because if you're not athletic, you don't want to be put on a rope and swim after somebody. Athleticism is important. Experience is important. You know, you don't want to just, you know, I'm a little older, I'm not as nimble as I used to be. So like, I'm not dying to go on live bait. I'd much rather take a 22-year-old who just took a class, who's very nimble, versus me, who I'm getting a little chubby, and I'm not dying to be on the end of a rope above a sieve. So, you know, I think you need to make a choice whether you want to potentially be put on a rope to save somebody. So that's a lot of information and a lot of thoughts, and I'm always looking for comments. I feel like, in general, this Astral Green jacket is sort of like the go-to jacket for everybody. And it has a safety harness. The reason it's a go-to jacket is because the front pocket is awesome, these side pockets are great, and it looks cool. And so for me, looking ahead to future PFD designs, I would love to find something that has like good pockets for safety equipment, has good flotation, and has a choice to not have the safety harness if you don't want it. Because this PFD has a bunch of extra stitching and stuff built in just to handle a safety harness. So Astro makes the blue jacket, which is a version of this with a safety harness, but the pockets are kind of weak, and for me, there's holes in them because they're just sort of a weak material. So anyway, those are the thoughts about safe rescue vests. I want to call them safety vests, rescue vests. And again, like, I would highly recommend, when you're thinking about like being safer on the water, putting most of your energy into safety and prevention, how to make good decisions, paddling well, working as a team. And again, I really feel like this book is an amazing resource for that. It's a reminder of all the decisions you can make to help keep yourself from getting in accidents. And then if you do have an accident, it's really nice to know what to do, have training, have practice, so that you can effect some rescue. So, and then the very last thing I want to say, talk about this buckle a little bit, if you made it this far in the video. These buckles release or don't release, and having this be releasable is key. Release or don't release based on a number of factors. One is your weight. If you're super heavy, it's more likely to release, right? If you're really light, it's less likely to release because the weight pushing on you in the current. And this tail is really important. So I usually like to have this tail be about a hand's bit. Mine's about an inch longer than my hand, but it's because I normally wear this with a like fleece and a dry suit. So with fleece and a dry suit, this is a little bit shorter. And the key is that this doesn't release on its own, but when you pull this, it does release. And this is something you should practice. You don't want to go into like on live bait above a class 5 rapid, not being sure how this thing releases. And that's why practice is really important. And on these, you know, some people say only feed them through the plastic. I've heard that before. And by feeding them through the plastic, they'll easily release. That's super important. But if you're a big guy like me and you only feed through the plastic, it could release on its own. And in that case, there's this metal plate that you can feed it through that provides a little bit of extra friction, so it's less likely to release. And so this is where you getting practice with your PFD and being super confident that it won't release if it's closed, and it will release when it's open. And for everybody it's different, I believe, again, based on the PFD, the buckle, your size, a lot of factors. And so how you close the buckle is really important. If you just buy this thing off the shelf, have no experience with it, usually these leads are like sometimes 8 inches long. You don't cut it down. It's just a long one. If it's long, it has a hard time feeding through the system and could get bound when you want it to release. And so for those of you wanting to buy a safety PFD, I think it's, again, really important. Get the training, practice with it, cut this lead down, and then make sure that it releases when you want to, right? It actually releases, but also if you go in current with it, however you have it set up, it doesn't release on its own for some reason. So again, a lot of information. Thank you all for hanging in. I highly recommend this book. I'll put a link to it in the Amazon. I've been reading it lately. I'll put a link in the notes to Amazon where you can get it. I get a little commission if you buy this from that link, so I appreciate that. And yeah, again, as always, add comments and subscribe if you want. And yeah, see you next time.